Aloha and welcome to Power in Partnership, our online master series where we explore how to rekindle connection, grow conscious partnership, and focus on what matters most. My name is Amy Elizabeth Gordon. I am your host in this PIP series, and I am delighted today to welcome Philip Shepard, who joins us from his Toronto location. Philip is an international authority on embodiment, and I'd love for him to introduce himself and say a few more words.
I'd be delighted to. It's a pleasure to think of you in Hawaii as I'm here in snowbound Toronto. I like that. I like that link. My background is theater, and my background is more specifically classical Japanese theater. When I was a teenager, I witnessed, there's a form of theater in Japan called no theater. And I witnessed a no play and was shaken by it. I'd never encountered such restrained beauty, such, if you distinguish between signal and noise, there was no noise. There was just pure signal of being. And I decided to go and study it. Not having any money, being 18 years old, I went to England and got a bicycle and reasoned, that if I kept pedaling and didn't stop and was heading in the right direction, that I'd get there. And it turns out I did. And my understanding of embodiment owes a deep, deep debt to Japanese no theater. And I discovered I was unable to even begin to grasp how that form of theater had had such an emotional impact on me. And while I was there, I discovered the Japanese concept of hara, H-A-R-A. And hara in the Japanese culture, it means belly, but you can't translate it as belly in English because, belly in English means that area, that's prone to indigestion and sometimes an embarrassment as it gains weight, or it can be a source of vanity, but it's nothing to, it's just not the same realm as the Japanese version of hara. And in the Japanese culture, hara is where you come home to yourself. It's where you encounter your living truth. And as I watched no theater, every gesture arose from that deep embodied understanding. A head would turn and see from that place. And in my culture, I'd just never seen that phenomenon. And so I came back to Canada and started, co-founded a company called Physical Theater, where we explored the physicality of theater. And my inclination being of a curious nature, I'm always, asking questions about these cultural differences and about our culture and how can we both be born into this human body and experience it so differently because of the culture in which we're raised. And I discovered that actually in the European culture, our center of awareness began deep in the belly in the late Paleolithic, early Neolithic, and you see it in the art and in the orientation of the culture towards the mother. And then we discovered agriculture. And you put a seed into the ground and everything changes. Suddenly you own that ground. It's no longer a seamless part of the manifestation of the goddess, and suddenly the plant growing beside it is a weed and has to be exterminated, and the animal coming along is vermin, and the tree casting it in the shade has to be cut down. So the whole agenda of the world came, and we take control rather than come into harmony with. And as that happens, the center of our awareness began to rise up through our body until it found its way into the head, and it's been there since Plato's day, like 350 BC. And we've habituated to that. It's become what a human being is in our culture. And so my journey to embodiment is one that understands that my profoundest intelligence is something I connect with as I drop into the body, which is very different from our cultural exhortations to listen to the body. You mistake that as embodiment. And I have nothing against listening to the body, but don't call it embodiment, because if you're listening to the body, you're sitting up in your head, noticing what's going on down below. It's like you're being told there's a wall separating you from your body. And the best you can do is to put your ear to that wall once in a while to find out what's going on the other side of it. So my embodiment is, what I teach is about how to come home to yourself in that way, which, as you do it, dissolves that very Western sense of being independent and separate and disconnected from the world around you.
Beautiful, beautiful introduction around your journey and the discovery and learning more about the evolution of our culture and how we've shifted our center, if you will, and that your work is really about coming back into that embodied place of not the staying in the head, listening to the body, but really dropping down. And I so appreciate hearing the origins of hara, because as I start these interviews, I invite us to take a few moments, to take a few breaths, and really allow that attention to go within. So if you're willing and able to lower your gaze or close your eyes, I invite all of those who are listening as well, as long as they're not driving a vehicle at the moment, to just take a moment to pause, to really settle within, to feel that natural alignment that brings us strength and vulnerability through allowing the head to rest over the heart, to rest over the hara, and really, as you so beautifully said, Philip, to come home to ourself, to really drop down in, using a deep breath in through the nose, and exhaling, inviting that exhale to be a little longer than the inhale. Inhaling what has already happened thus far today. Exhaling what is no longer needed in this moment. Inhaling plans for the rest of the day. Noticing or noticing and letting go. And breathing in the sweetness of this moment right here, right now. And releasing. And Philip, I invite us and those who are watching to really bring themselves into a space of honoring the wisdom that's all around us, that perhaps our cultural dictates have cut us off from in some ways. We can reclaim that connection now to our independence and allow the head to drop to the level of the heart through the practice of the bow. Inhaling and exhaling, falling forward. Thank you. And Philip, I would love to offer a few sentence stems. But before I do that, I really loved this statement in your bio, which I think sums up a lot of what you just shared about your personal experience, which, if I may quote, the biggest adventure of Philip's life has been coming to terms with the subtle and often hidden aspects of our culture that affect us all, compromising our sense of wholeness, our connection with the living world, our freedom of expression, and our creative engagement with the present. And I just found that so powerful. I wanted to share that as part of your introduction as well. Anything you'd like to add to that before I go on with our sentence stems?
Yeah, just to say what what has taken me my lifetime to recognize and extricate myself from is our cultural commitment to the head, which says, it says with our architecture, with our language, with our hierarchies, that the head should be in charge, that the rightful ruler is the head. And that's, that's part of that transition as we left the goddess of the earth and transition the center of our awareness moving up through the head and shifted our allegiance to the God in the sky. We shifted our allegiance to our cranial intelligence, which is abstract and systematizing and controlling, and it's what gains perspective on the world. And you think of the act of gaining perspective, what it requires is distance. You have no perspective when you're in the middle of something. You step back from it and you gain perspective. So we step back from that teeming avalanche of sensations within the body and have come to believe that we can think more clearly with that dissociated intelligence in the head. So our core belief says you will think better with a small portion of your intelligence than you will think with the whole of your intelligence. And that cultural bias, it's not, to extricate myself from it, it's not a matter of going back to a Neolithic or late Paleolithic sensibility. There's no turning our back on abstraction. It's so deeply a part of everything we live by. So I think in terms of the evolution of our consciousness, until now, we've experienced our consciousness as a localized phenomenon, whether it's been in the belly or whether it's been in the heart or whether it's been in the head. And even today, we'll flip among those. So you can be in a lovely, sensual, embodied place, and then someone asks you an abstract question, and you flip out of that into the head, which is so very different from the integration of the whole of your intelligence. And so I think when that happens, your thinking is no longer divided from your being, which I feel is the primary wound of our culture. And it's like your consciousness is experienced as this axis that runs through the body from the pelvic bowl up to the head. And like a bar magnet, that axis holds a field around it. And your border, the border of yourself, is at the limit of that field, but the limit of that field doesn't exist.
Yes. That certainly brings to mind for me that sense of our interconnectedness. And I have been inspired to bring this Power in Partnership series together to explore a new way of viewing power, away from that, as you described it, the head-dominated culture, which I think just leads us all into analysis paralysis, where we just get frozen. That tower of power of dominating over or trying to control, which thereby implies others must submit to, really shifting that into what I heard described the other day as a network. That power, the future of power, is a network of pathways, well-trodden pathways to our neighbor's door. And just that idea of how interconnected we are, how our needs and desires are not so different from each other, and how we can help, as the topic of your interview today, partnering into wholeness. And so with that, I want to dive into that. So maybe letting go of some of the original sentence stems, although I can't let go of this one. It's so crucial to me. As I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing. How would you respond to that, Philip?
As I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing, as I've been with you in your explication of the power of partnership, and in that transition from segregated awareness to a whole body awareness, I no longer even have the sense of thinking in an independent way. My thinking is guided by, informed by, pulled by, drawn by, informed by the present. And as I rest in the present, I feel it tangibly calling me, shaping my sensitivity. So any clarity that comes through in my writing or my teaching or my speaking isn't a clarity that I possess. It's a result of a surrender that lands me in the lap of this sensitized field. And in my first book, New Self, New World, I referred to it as co-rational thinking hand in hand with the world. So that's what I'm experiencing at the moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. I really get that sense of connectivity as I hear you speak, and that, as we would call in Buddhist psychology, the egolessness, the sense of oneness. Am I getting you?
Yeah. And I don't think of it as egolessness. Why is that? I guess because I guess wholeness excludes nothing. Right? Doesn't exclude the ego. But so the phrase I would use is that I come into a place of non-personal intimacy, where I feel the world with a ravishing intimacy, and I don't take any of it personally.
Yeah, I love that, and I really hope that can be an invitation to our audience today. That because I know when I'm working with people through the Buddhist psychology lens, we bump up against that egolessness, and people feel a deep, almost existential fear of, I don't want to lose myself. And how you just described that is much more inviting and palatable, in my humble opinion, that it's not about losing oneself, it's about not taking things personally, and about having that real, raw, vulnerable intimacy with the present moment and the world around us in a way that is the wholeness, that is the inclusivity. Am I getting you?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So, okay, real quick, the next sentence, Tim, where I'd like to be at the end of my life or career, whichever resonates with you. How would you respond to that?
Like at the moment of my death?
Sure. Where do you want to be?
At the moment of my death, I cherish the surrender that allows me to feel my partnership with the present. And I see that as here's the funny thing about death is I don't know that I ever need to say I am dying, because I could equally say I am living. At any moment, if I can think, I am experiencing my life, and that's where I want to be in the fullest sense of that, in the most dilated sense of that possible.
The most dilated sense of that possible. What a beautiful image. Wow. Oh boy. Say more.
Say more about that.
Were you going to?
I'm content to rest the sentence there, but I'm happy to say more about anything. Anytime.
Right. Okay, so we'll carry on. The one thing I can do to help me continue to cherish that relationship with the present moment, to surrender into it. What way? How do you do that? Do you have a particular practice or some sort of daily experience that you can share with us?
In my work, I've come to understand that you have a choice. You can live in a world of ideas, or you can live in a world of energy. And ideas are frozen energy, and or more specifically, an unintegrated idea is frozen energy. Because the only issue for me is integration. What am I not integrating, and how do I dissolve that into contact with my being? So as I'm increasingly inclined to attune myself to the world of energy that does not readily lend itself to being frozen into bits and pieces, that energy is primarily felt through my being. And it's simply true that the higher my energy is in the body, the more alone I feel in the world.
Mm.
And to recognize that, in the context of our culture, which says relentlessly over and over that up is good and down is bad. You're looking up today, he's looking a little down. Things have taken a downturn. I mean, we know what these phrases mean. In another culture, you're looking up today could mean you're looking a little disconnected from Mother Earth. John's looking a little down could mean, boy, he's looking at peace with himself and at rest in the moment. But it doesn't. In our culture, up is good. Heaven is up. Hell is down. We've turned that mother into hell. And so that's a result of this long journey we've made in the body, where we've left the female pole of our consciousness and risen up through the body and given our allegiance in the hope that it will keep us safe to this systemizing, analyzing, controlling, anxious energy of the head. Now, so the head is, that intelligence is brilliant. They're both needed, but home is not in the head. Home is in that place on the pelvic floor, on the perineum. When and I'm talking not about noticing the perineum. I'm talking about allowing the center of your awareness to drop down through the body and rest there. And when you rest there, you're resting in a realm that doesn't require language, doesn't require conscious thought, but attunes to that river of partnership whereby the exchanges between you and the present are seamless and unending. And in that attunement, I discover myself. I don't discover myself by going inside to some inner sanctuary. I can discover impediments to my resonance, impediments to that partnership. The way a bell, you can stuff a bell full of cotton balls and it loses its ring. So my body, in that congested state, if the energy goes high, will lose that sensitivity to the partnership that's there. But my to come home to myself isn't an inner thing, it's a relationship. And I discover who I am through felt relationship. That's what illuminates my being. Whether it's a relationship with a kid playing on the sidewalk, or bird song, or a tree, or my cup of tea. Through that felt relationship, however it manifests, I'm illuminated. And that felt relationship is only possible when the body's energy is not high, when I'm not feeling alone, when it descends and comes to rest on the pelvic floor, and then my consciousness is at rest in a realm that understands wholeness. And because it understands wholeness, it includes the abstract thinking of the head.
Right.
Unlike the abstract thinking of the head, which deliberately demeans and excludes the intelligence of the body.
Yes, yes. I would love to take a moment to highlight that, the importance of the both and, the embodied presence within. As I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing, my feet on the ground, my sits bones making contact with the cushion because I find this chair unbearably comfortable. Sitting is not my friend in a lot of ways. So relating to that, noticing, being aware of, residing in that place, and still being here, integrating these amazing ideas that you're putting forth. And so I find myself taking notes furiously over here, bringing myself back, listening, managing the both and of, I so want to get you up here. And I so feel it already within that it's, to me, it's when the known is being spoken, when the ideas can be integrated more readily because there's a resonance. There's a, I know this to be true. And I've had personally such a resentment towards the modern culture, the dominant cultures that be, and I've never quite been able to articulate why. And what I'm really appreciating about you, Philip, is you're naming it. It's like naming it to tame it in a way of, okay, this is how we've gotten up here, bringing it back down. And I think that's one reason I personally have found myself living off the mainland on an island. I know you were sharing that you live on an island as well. And there's a different cultural norm here, if you will. And one of the Olelo Hawaii terms for the guts, the intuition, the hara that you were describing is called the na'au, N-A-O-Kina-A-U. And so we often say in their t-shirts that say, live in the na'au, live in the now, live in the na'au. And that makes sense to me. This is my body knowing, this is the wisdom that's here. And so to know that and recognize that we're in this place, we can embrace our wholeness, show up more readily in our partnership, and really tend to that space between in a way where it feels like, I was going to say fertilizing the space within, but I'm cautious about that seed image going down. So am I getting you, Philip, in terms of a summary of what I hear you saying and adding in a little of my own personal experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps, in sort of peeling back the veneer of our culture and looking at what's under the hood. It really helps to understand the extent to which we gravitate towards independence, where we want, we're taught at a very early age to stand on our own 2 feet and be independent. And our whole culture gravitates towards the fantasy of independence. And I say the fantasy because there's no such thing. You can't point anywhere in the cosmos to an instance of independence. There is only relationship. There is only leaning on everything that is. There is only being affected by everything that is. That's the nature of our reality. And myth, as clarified by Joseph Campbell, describes the tyrant very pointedly. Joseph Campbell describes the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. Mm. And even as I speak those words, I realize I'm giving voice to the American dream. Mm-hmm. What is the American dream if it's not self-achieved independence? I mean, that sounds great. Have enough money to build your mansion on the hill with the gate and the compound and everything you need inside, and to be able to withdraw from neighbors' responsibilities, from anyone else's needs but your own. So the tyrant illuminates for us our gravitational pull in this culture towards this fantasy of independence. And that is concurrent with our energy going higher and higher in the body, because the energy gets up to the head, and your independence is tangibly felt because you've dissociated from the very intelligence that connects you to the present. And that quality of the tyrant, that dangerous fantasy that has us all in its hold in one way or another, is opposed to everything that nature loves. Mm-hmm. So you think about what nature loves. And nature, I mean, first of all, nature loves change. Nothing's the same from one moment to the next. It is a flow, a celebration that always moves on, never stops and says, oh yes, this is the destination. There is no destination. It moves and changes. And nature loves diversity. I mean, there are no two blades of grass that are identical. There are no, you can stand in a blizzard and there are no two snowflakes coming down that are identical. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, the egg came first because every chicken is a new step in the evolution of the species. It's always changing. And nature loves service. There is nothing that is born that is not born into service. The earthworm is born into service. The swallow is born into service. The flower in the meadow is born into service. And the tyrant, resents change because it's going to upset his plans. The tyrant fears diversity because conformity and control are the way he asserts his needs. And the tyrant serves only himself. So to speak of power in partnership is to begin to understand that living in the head, that withdrawal of the awareness from the body into the head is a retreat from partnership into going it alone and feeling alone. And the remedy is not found in idea. So much of the New Age movement basically tacitly says, the ideas you're living with now aren't working. They're corrupt. You need this new set of ideas to live with. But our very problem is subjugating the body to the tyranny of ideas. And the present is here in all its living sensitivity. And the more we adhere to ideas, the less available we are to anything the present is offering us.
Yeah. So rich, so much there to dive into. I'm already looking forward to listening to this again to get more about it and just really feeling that invitation to come home to oneself, to come back to the present moment, to recognize that everything is relational. So, some people say, but I'm not in relationship. I'm not in partnership. Is this series going to be for me? And I challenge people on that. Like, show me how you're not in relationship. We're all in relational fields all the time. And that going back in the head, feeding that sense of independence, of isolation, of loneliness, of, I've got to do it all myself. It's an epidemic brought about by our culture, and that there is a way to do it differently. And it may not come through the thought stream of New Age thinking. It's a dropping down. And as you talked about earlier, that we have such an idea that up is better, but dropping down into,
Yeah, it's like somebody asked me to give a talk to their organization. They said, "What would you like to call it?" And I said, well, why don't we call it Lower Your Consciousness? And, it's so, raise your consciousness. But I mean, I've no problem with that. But in that sense, the higher, the finer and higher your consciousness goes, the more deeply it requires that grounding on the earth in the ordinariness of this moment.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I take my boys out in nature as much as possible, and we're going to plant trees. Oh, Mom, it's Saturday morning. We're going to get up and we're going to go out and we're going to be of service. We're going to change up our routine. All those things you talked about. Look at the diversity of this dry forest, which has more diversity than the tropical rainforest up there, and immerse ourselves in that, where the teaching and the knowing is happening on a cellular level without the books and the iPads and the quizzing at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have no issue with with the books. I wrote 2 books. How
Yeah.
could I, right? It would be somewhat hypocritical, but the issue for me is we're running on ideas that are not integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So this wound in our culture I talk about, which is the wound between our thinking and our being, is deliberately, systematically inculcated into us by this 12-year apprenticeship we do in the public school system, where you're taught to suppress the body's energy and control it and fill your head with the right ideas, and then you'll do well. And this divide, so that eventually you think without feeling.
Mm.
And that is the most dangerous state in which to act on the world in any way at all.
Yeah.
And as your thinking and your being integrate, as that marriage happens and they find each other and each finding its gifts fulfilled through that partnership, it becomes impossible to think without feeling the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes impossible to feel any sensations in the body without recognizing those as a language of thought.
Yes. Yes. I appreciate the emphasis over and over again on the necessity of integrated ideas. And what you're sharing is inspiring me, because I too, I have not published a book yet, but I've written a lot right up here and integrating them down into my experience, into my world, my knowing that I have now. That marriage has happened and the gestation is happening, and I feel closer to that in terms of sharing the integrated ideas. So I too want to make a stand for the importance of books and the sharing of knowledge, and it's the both and getting out there in the world and doing this gig called life, getting our hands dirty and living it. And so as we come back to our sentence stems, I just have a couple more as we wrap up our interview today. And we've kind of touched on this, but what matters most, Philip, in the relational field? How would you respond to that notion of what matters most?
I coined a term when I was a teenager, eleuthromaniac. I called myself an eleuthromaniac. And it just means a mania for freedom. The tyrant, here's another interesting thing. The tyrant finds freedom in security. And that's his belief system. And the more security he can establish, the more free he believes he will be. It doesn't, the security turns into a cage, but that's often a late realization along this path. The hero finds his freedom in surrender. So it's like he finds security in freedom. So in that freedom of surrender, that letting go, that free fall, to arrive here, you arrive at a security that no one can take away from you, which is the security of your being. Mm-hmm. And that security, and when I say the security of your being, I keep having to reframe my terminologies, because, being in our culture is understood as that sanctuary within the skin. And it's just, again, it's that fantasy of independence that is defining the very terms with which we bring our world into focus. My being is what I discover when I'm fully present. Mm. Everything I'm present to is a part of my being, is a part of my experience. And so that, when I say what matters most, my freedom, when my life is liberated into the present, that is my experience of freedom.
Yeah. My life is liberated into the present. And if I may share something you mentioned before we hit the record button, you talked about the presence you have with your beloved wife when she travels with you as an unmitigated joy. So I just wanted to weave that in, that the freedom is so much what I hear you saying. It's so much not about that seeking independence and I can do whatever I want and all that. It's a surrendering to that present moment, opening yourself up to receive that unmitigated joy when you're with your beloved. Am I getting you?
Yeah. There is no distinction between my freedom and my wholeness.
Yeah.
And each one of us is blindsided to our wholeness. And I look at my wife, and more deeply than with the child or the tree or the bird, I discover myself. And I am brought alive by her being, and in the same moment I will never know her. I look to her to discover her. I don't look to her knowing whom I'll see when I do. And in the bottomless mystery of who she is, I discover myself and I come home to myself.
Yeah. Whew. Wonderful, wonderful. Beautifully put. The bottomless mystery of your beloved. You find yourself in your wholeness. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up with this final sentence stem. One thing I appreciate.
I would say gentleness.
Gentleness.
To me, gentleness is the quality of felt relationship. And we live according to known relationship. We want to know the world and know our relationships. And in gentleness, you move into felt relationship. And you pick up your cup of tea gently, or you look gently into another's eyes, or you take a baby's arm and you move it into a sleeve gently. And in that gentleness, you feel the whole of that baby. You are at one with that baby, and you're dancing that arm into the sleeve. And in our culture, we forget to offer the world gentleness.
Yeah.
And so we rob ourselves of it.
Yes. Philip, I needed to hear that. My mama bear wants to change the world, wants to shift our dominant paradigm of how we see the world. And it's not always done with the greatest of gentleness or grace. And what I just heard you say is a reminder, particularly that image of the young infant putting the arm back in the sleeve, just gently doing that. If I could do that then, I can do that now. It's within me. It's within my capacity to grow myself in greater gentleness. And
and I think to lose gentleness is in some way inevitably to sacrifice your wholeness, because usually what takes over from gentleness is an idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're in a top-down modality. If idea is running the show, it can only be top-down.
Right. And as we discuss that, I can feel an immediate contraction, constriction, tightness of my energy. And my practice has been to release the pinch. And one way I can do that is with that gentleness and that embodiment. And so thank you for all of your wisdom, for all of your time today, your expertise on this very, very important topic. And I'm wondering if you have a free gift you'd like to offer. I know we're going to put an audio link on our emails. Is there something you wanted to say about that right now?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's one thing to talk, and it's another thing to experience. And I spend most of my year teaching workshops and teaching facilitators how to teach the workshop. And so I think what would be most meaningful in this context would be to offer an exercise. There's a set of 8 exercises on my website that is offered for sale, but I'd love to offer one of those, and it's very near the heart of what we've been discussing. It's called The Elevator.
Mm.
So yeah, I'd love people to listen to that. It's an audio exercise, to listen to it and see where it takes them.
Wonderful, wonderful. I look forward to doing that. I'll leave my pen and paper here in the office and find myself in another position to receive that. Thank you for your free gift offering. Again, thank you for your time today, and we'll close our intentional interview with a bow. Mahalo nui loa. Great big thanks.